There's a quiet moment most people overlook, usually late at night or early in the morning, when the world pauses and the noise fades away. For many people, that silence feels uncomfortable, almost heavy, pushing them to turn on music, check their phones, or search for conversation just to escape the stillness. But for some people, that silence feels strangely comforting, almost like returning home. If you are someone who genuinely enjoys being alone, you probably recognize this feeling. Not the painful loneliness people often talk about, not the sense of being abandoned or forgotten, but something different, a calm distance from the noise of the world. While others feel restless when plans get canceled, you might secretly feel relief. While people worry about missing out, you sometimes experience the quiet satisfaction of stepping away from everything. And yet, this preference is often misunderstood. People assume that enjoying solitude means you dislike others, that you are antisocial, shy, or emotionally distant. But psychology suggests something more interesting. Not everyone experiences social interaction in the same way. For some people, conversations and social environments create energy. Their minds become sharper when they are surrounded by people. But for others, those same environments quietly drain their mental energy. Crowded rooms, constant conversations, and endless stimulation can feel overwhelming in subtle ways, not necessarily frightening, just exhausting. And when that mental energy fades, the mind begins craving space, not because it hates people, but because it needs silence to reset itself. That is when solitude becomes valuable. In those quiet moments, your thoughts begin to move differently. Ideas connect more freely, memories surface, and questions appear that rarely show up during busy social interactions. You start noticing patterns in people, in conversations, and the strange rhythms of everyday life. Psychologists often describe this as introspection, the ability to examine your own thoughts and experiences more deeply. People who enjoy being alone tend to develop a strong relationship with their inner world. You might find yourself replaying conversations, analyzing behavior, wondering why people say one thing but feel another. To others, it may look like overthinking, but internally it feels more like curiosity, a quiet attempt to understand how people and the world actually work. Another reason solitude feels appealing is because many people who value it have a low tolerance for superficial interaction. Small talk can feel strangely exhausting, not because it is difficult, but because it feels empty. Conversations that repeat the same predictable topics again and again rarely satisfy a curious mind. But when a rare conversation appears, one that is honest, thoughtful, and emotionally real, people who usually prefer solitude can talk for hours without feeling drained. They are not avoiding connection, they are simply searching for depth. And depth is rare in a world that moves quickly. Modern life is louder than it has ever been. Notifications never stop, opinions travel instantly across the internet, and social media quietly encourages everyone to display their lives constantly, turning ordinary experiences into performances. In that environment, solitude almost becomes a form of freedom. When you step away from the constant noise, something unusual happens. You stop measuring yourself through the reactions of others. You stop comparing your life to curated images and endless opinions. You simply exist without needing to prove anything to anyone. For many people, this freedom becomes addictive in the healthiest possible way. Solitude offers something modern culture rarely provides: mental space, space to think slowly, space to observe the world without reacting immediately, space to understand your own thoughts without interruption. Sometimes life experiences shape this preference as well. Some people learned early that being alone felt safer than being misunderstood. Maybe they grew up in environments where their voice was rarely heard, or where emotional space was limited, or where staying quiet simply felt easier than competing for attention. Over time, the mind adapts, and solitude becomes familiar territory, a place where thoughts feel clear and emotions feel manageable. Psychologists sometimes call this emotional self-sufficiency, the ability to regulate your own feelings without constantly needing reassurance from others. For many people who enjoy solitude, this becomes a quiet strength. They do not panic when they spend time alone. They do not feel incomplete without constant interaction, and their identity develops more from internal reflection than from external approval. But spending time alone also changes the way you observe the world. When you step back from constant social interaction, you start noticing patterns others rarely see. You see how people change depending on who they are around, how conversations follow invisible scripts, how social expectations shape personalities in subtle ways. This awareness can make the world feel strangely transparent, almost like watching a play where you suddenly notice the stage behind the actors. And sometimes that awareness creates distance, not because you dislike people, but because you begin seeing how much of everyday interaction is shaped by unspoken roles and expectations. That is why solitude often feels easier. In solitude, there is no performance. There is no need to adjust your personality, monitor every word, or match the emotional tone of a room. You can simply exist as yourself. Interestingly, people who enjoy solitude are often deeply empathetic. They tend to notice emotional shifts in others quickly, reading subtle expressions, tones of voice, and unspoken tensions in the environment. But empathy can also be exhausting. Feeling the emotional atmosphere of every room requires energy, attention, and awareness. Solitude becomes the place where that sensitivity can rest, where the mind can recover from absorbing so much information from the outside world. Over time, this creates a fascinating paradox. People who enjoy being alone are often capable of forming very meaningful relationships. They simply do not need many of them. A few deep connections feel more valuable than dozens of casual interactions. And because they spend so much time reflecting on their own thoughts and emotions, they often bring unusual depth, patience, and understanding into the relationships they choose to keep. Unfortunately, modern culture rarely celebrates this quieter way of living. Society often measures success through visibility, popularity, constant activity, always being surrounded by people. From that perspective, solitude can look like withdrawal. But that interpretation misses something important. Solitude is not the absence of life. For many people, it is the place where life becomes clearer. It is where creativity emerges, where ideas slowly connect, where identity forms without constant outside interference. Throughout history, many writers, philosophers, scientists, and artists have described the same experience. The quiet mental landscape where thoughts expand in unexpected directions. But you do not need to be a philosopher to experience it. Anyone who has taken a long walk alone thinking about their life understands it. In those moments, something subtle happens. The noise of other people's expectations fades, and your own internal voice becomes easier to hear. What you actually think, what you actually want, which parts of your life feel real, and which parts feel borrowed from the expectations of everyone around you. And perhaps that is the real psychology behind people who enjoy being alone. They are not escaping the world. They are trying to understand it, and sometimes understanding requires distance. It requires stepping back from the crowd long enough to see patterns that the crowd itself cannot notice. So if you often prefer solitude, it might not mean you are disconnected from people. It might simply mean you are deeply connected to your own mind. And in a world that rarely slows down long enough for reflection, that ability is becoming increasingly rare and increasingly valuable. The next time you find yourself sitting quietly while the world rushes around you, notice the feeling carefully, not loneliness, but space. Space to think, space to observe, space to exist without expectation. Because sometimes the most important conversations you will ever have are the quiet ones happening inside your own mind. And if this way of experiencing the world feels familiar, then perhaps you are not alone in the way most people imagine. You are simply part of a quieter human experience, one that many people are only beginning to rediscover. And if these reflections resonate with something you have felt but never quite explained, feel free to share your thoughts below. Because here on Mind Reader, the most interesting discoveries often begin with a simple curiosity about how the human mind really works.